Have you ever made a snap decision without thinking? Or maybe you've overthought something simple and ended up making the wrong call. Today, we're diving into one of the most insightful books about the way we think, Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your brain tricks you into making decisions you don't even realize. In two systems of thinking, fast versus slow. First, let's talk about the two systems of thinking that shape all of our decisions. Kahneman breaks them down like this. System 1, fast, automatic, and effortless. It's the system that runs on autopilot. When you drive somewhere and don't remember the exact details of the drive, that's System 1. It takes in a lot of information, instantly makes decisions, and relies on patterns, intuition, and experience. System 2, slow, deliberate, and logical. This system is what we use when we're solving a math problem or making a big decision, like whether to move to a new city or change careers. It's much more effortful, and it requires more focus and concentration. I remember planning a trip with friends. We went with the first place that looked cool without even checking if flights were affordable. That was me trusting System 1 to make the decision. But I didn't realize until later that System 2 should have stepped in to ask, can we actually afford this? Actionable step. Next time you make a big decision, pause and ask yourself, am I letting my brain make this decision on autopilot? Should I slow down and use System 2? 2. Cognitive biases, why we often get it wrong. Now let's talk about cognitive biases, our brain's tendency to take shortcuts that lead to poor decisions. Kahneman explains a few of these biases that affect us every day. Anchoring bias. This happens when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive. It could be the first price you see for a product, or even the first opinion someone shares with you. Availability heuristic. This is when we make decisions based on the information that's easiest to recall, like hearing about a plane crash in the news and assuming flying is dangerous, even though statistically, it's much safer than driving. Ever picked a restaurant just because it was on your way, even if you could have gone somewhere better? That's bias in action, actionable step. The next time you're making a decision, step back and think about where the information is coming from. Is it the first thing that popped into your head? Or is it the most readily available piece of info? 3. Substitution. Ask yourself the right question. Here's a trick our brains love to play on us. Substitution. This happens when we're faced with a tough question, and instead of answering it, we substitute it with an easier one. For example, when asked, how happy are you with your life? You might subconsciously answer, am I feeling good today? Because that's much easier to respond to, but it doesn't really get to the heart of the bigger question. When I was deciding whether to buy a new phone, I asked myself, will I enjoy having this phone? Rather than, can I afford this right now? Does it make sense for me to buy this in the long term? I let my brain substitute the easy question, and I ended up overspending. Actionable step. Next time you're faced with a tough decision, challenge yourself. Is this the real question I should be asking? Ask deeper, more meaningful questions instead of accepting the easy ones your mind throws at you. 4. The planning fallacy, why we underestimate time. One of the biggest traps we fall into is the planning fallacy. It's the tendency to underestimate how much time, money, or effort something will take. Even when we've done similar things before, we consistently expect things to go faster or smoother than they actually will. This leads to unrealistic expectations and a lot of stress. Kahneman explains that we tend to focus on the best-case scenario and ignore the things that could go wrong. We don't account for unexpected challenges or obstacles. It's why people often say, this project will only take a few hours, and then it turns into days of work. How many times have you thought, this will be quick, only for it to turn into a massive project? I know I've been there. Actionable step. Next time you plan something, add extra time to your timeline. Factor in setbacks or challenges that could pop up. When you're honest about the potential hurdles, you'll feel more prepared and less stressed. 5. Prospect theory. Why we fear loss more than we value gains. Here's one that really affects our behavior. Prospect theory. Kahneman explains that we feel the pain of loss much more intensely than the joy of gaining something of equal value. For example, if you lose $100, it feels much worse than gaining $100 feels good. This is a big reason why we tend to hold on to losing investments, make irrational decisions, and avoid taking risks. I once held onto a stock that was losing value because I didn't want to lose the small amount I had invested. Even though the market was tanking, I kept holding on because I couldn't bear the thought of selling and admitting defeat. Actionable step. If you're holding on to something out of fear of loss, ask yourself, what's the cost of keeping this? Am I losing more by holding on than I would if I just let go? 6. Experiencing self versus remembering self. The happiness trick. Kahneman also talks about two versions of ourselves, the experiencing self and the remembering self. The experiencing self is the part of us that lives in the present, experiencing the emotions we feel right now. The remembering self is the one who looks back and reflects on the past, and it's heavily influenced by our memories. The problem is that we often make decisions based on our remembering self, which doesn't accurately reflect our actual experiences. For example, a vacation might feel stressful while we're on it, but we tend to remember it more fondly once it's over. Ever felt like an event was awful at the time, but now that you look back, you remember it as fun? That's your brain's selective memory at work. Actionable step. When you're reflecting on your life or an experience, separate how you feel now from how you'll remember it. The present experience is just a small piece of the puzzle. 7. Endowment Effect. Why we overvalue what we own. Here's a fascinating concept, the endowment effect. This happens when we overvalue something simply because we own it.
It's why people tend to overprice their old stuff when they're trying to sell it.
It's not about the actual value, it's about how much we think it's worth because it's ours. I once tried to sell a jacket I never wore, and I thought it was worth way more than I paid for it. I had owned it for years, so in my mind it had more value than it actually did. Actionable step. Next time you're selling something, take a step back and ask yourself, would someone else value this as much as I do? Try to detach from the emotional connection you have to your belongings. 8. Overconfidence bias, the dangers of thinking we know it all. Kahneman dives deep into overconfidence bias, our tendency to overestimate our knowledge and abilities.
This bias is dangerous because it leads to poor decision-making.
We ignore the possibility that we might be wrong or miss important information. I've definitely thought I knew all the answers, only to realize I didn't. Has that ever happened to you? Actionable step. Recognize when you're being overconfident.
Embrace a mindset that says, I don't know everything, and that's okay.
The more open you are to learning, the better decisions you'll make. 9. The power of framing, how information affects our choices. Kahneman shows us how framing changes the way we perceive information. For example, when presented with a risky situation, we might be more likely to take a chance if it's framed as a potential gain rather than a potential loss. Saying, you have a 90% chance of survival sounds a lot better than saying, you have a 10% chance of dying, even though both statements are mathematically the same. I once bought a product because it was labeled 90% off. The way the deal was framed made me feel like I was missing out if I didn't buy it, even though I didn't need the product. Actionable step.
The next time you're making a decision, take a moment to consider how the information is being presented to you.
Is it influencing your choice in subtle ways? 10. Intuition versus reasoning, trusting your gut versus thinking it through. Finally, Kahneman talks about the relationship between intuition, System 1, and reasoning, System 2. Sometimes intuition can guide us quickly and efficiently, especially when the decision is familiar. But other times, we need to pause, slow down, and engage System 2 to think through a decision logically. Ever trusted your gut only to realize you made the wrong call? Or did your deep thinking save you from a bad decision? Let me know in the comments. Actionable step. Be aware of when your intuition is guiding you, and when you need to step back and reason things through. Use both systems wisely to make better choices. Conclusion. So there you have it. Thinking, fast and slow, is packed with insights on how our minds work and how we can make better decisions every day. If you want to dig deeper into how to improve your thinking and decision-making, check out my other videos on mindset and psychology. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a like in the comments if you want more content like this. See you in the next one!